In 15 years of helping people quit many different types of addiction, one thing that I've realized is that you'll very likely stay addicted or continue to relapse unless you understand these 6 stages of mind transformation, because it is about the mind. Addiction is not so much about the substance, it's about your mind. Let's talk about that. I mean, what if your thoughts really aren't yours? What if 95% of what runs through your head every day is just old programming? And what if freedom from these automatic thoughts, cravings, inner conflict, what if it wasn't about fighting that and controlling that? What if it was about learning to transform it? I first realized this when I had a spontaneous moment where all my thoughts just disappeared. And I had this deep sense of peace and everything was okay and everything was not separate. I was very young. I was studying philosophy at the time. It was maybe late teens. And it wasn't until I had that experience that I realized that I'm not my thoughts. I exist no matter what is happening in my mind or not happening. I'm still present as awareness. In this video, I'm going to show you the 6 stages that every human whose mind transforms goes through in order for that to occur. From being trapped in thought and addiction to living from an open awareness, deep peace and contentment point of view where addiction is literally obsolete. So if you've ever felt stuck in old habits and having cravings and inner conflict or emotional reactive cycles that just come out of the blue, this might very well explain why and how to break free. So let's begin with stage number 1, which is I'm going to call these moments of awakening, like I described. You can't really change or transform unless you become aware or more aware and see what the problem is, or see things from a different point of view. And it is literally a bit like waking up in the morning. You didn't know you were asleep until you woke up, and then you realize, oh, I was asleep. It's a bit like that in everyday life. I had one of these moments when I was doing a Vipassana meditation silent retreat for 10 days when I was in my early 20s. And it was a silent retreat, you either were meditating, eating, sleeping, or having one of these breaks. And on these breaks, you could go for a walk. And there was this walking track. It was basically a circuit, took about maybe 15, 20 minutes. And every day I'd walk around this track, and I'd kind of just walk around this track and probably a bit mindlessly in a way, and one day I realized, where am I going? I've probably about day 4 or 5. I'm here for another 5 or 6 days, and I'm just pounding around this track without thinking that I'm getting somewhere, but there's nowhere to go. I'm here for another 6 days. What am I doing? And everything just stopped. And I realized that my mind was basically overtaking me. I was just automatically kind of driving my body without even realizing it. And it wasn't until I had this kind of wake-up moment of awareness that I realized that that was what was happening. And it's these moments of like spontaneous waking up or awakening that everyone's had them. And often it happens when there's some shock or tragedy, when someone dies, perhaps, heaven forbid, or someone's born, or something just breaks you out of your ordinary day-to-day thinking. And it's these moments are very, very important. And when you become aware of this, linger there. Because the space that you're in, the mind awareness that you're in is much more open. And you also, in that experience, realize more of what you are. And it's very important to realize more and experience more if you're going to transform from the small kind of habitual autopilot mind that's been operating. So that's stage 1. Now, stage 2 is what I call opening awareness, where you're consciously learning to open your awareness into the state that you spontaneously realize with stage 1, these moments of awakening. So you want to learn how to consciously open your awareness to that state. Now, what is that state? Well, one of the best ways to describe it is in our ordinary day-to-day existence, it's a bit like watching a movie where you're caught in the movie. What do I mean by that? Well, you're watching the movie, particularly if you're in a cinema, and you forget that you're in the cinema. You forget that there's an edge to the screen. You forget the seat you're sitting on and the people next to you. You're fully engaged, like your mind, your awareness is fully engaged in the movie. And you then go along the highs and lows emotionally of that movie. You're not aware that you're separate from the movie. So you recognize those moments. Now, often in everyday life, that's what's occurring. We're not really aware of our own participation. We're just aware of getting caught up in and carried away with what's happening with the phenomena of our experience. So we can conceptualize this as the ability to observe that we are experiencing something. So when we have these moments of opening our awareness, we realize that we are observing what's going on. So in other words, our focus opens up, our awareness opens up, and it opens up to more of the phenomena that's occurring, like the 5 sense phenomena, but also inwardly and in our mind as well. And we become aware that we are aware, or aware that we're watching, observing what's happening in our experience. And this learning to open our awareness to that point is a very important stage, a very important skill. Now, let's make this relevant to addiction, because when you have a craving, you just get caught up in it. It's a very powerful, engaging experience where you just get caught up in it. And that's largely because it's subconscious. The subconscious is pushing this craving, this urgency, this anxiety, this fear, and also you've got these cravings. You've got this desire for pleasure, which is, again, very engaging, sweeps you up and carries you along, and you're not aware that you're present and this is happening. You're just engaged in that movie, aren't you? So what I want to point out here is it's very important that we do learn this skill to open up, because this gives us the chance to have more free choice about what we do. In other words, we can respond consciously rather than just simply reacting unconsciously. And in terms of transformation, in terms of ending addiction, we need to become more conscious of what's going on so we can have more choice. It's not about fighting the subconscious or fighting and conflicting and denying and repressing these experiences. It's about opening up to more of what's possible. And that's when we get to the deeper solution for, yes, our addiction, but actually the suffering of life anyway as well. So this brings us on to stage number 3. And this is what I would call a period of practicing awareness. Now, this is taking this skill that we've started to learn in stage 2, this ability to open and the ability to experience ourselves as the observer, as watching our own experience, and actually practicing this consciously. So there's 2 types of practice. There's what I would call undistracted practice, and then there's the practice in everyday life. So undistracted practice is where you have a time of day, a space that's relatively free of distraction, where you can learn and practice a specific skill of opening awareness. And this is done without any interruption. And so you're opening your awareness not just to what's present in terms of the five senses, but also what's present in terms of your mind, experiencing your own mind, and ultimately experiencing awareness itself, and also what the mind is. So without practicing this, um, everything is just happening in autopilot. Everything is happening automatically. And it has been almost, from the very beginning of our life. This is the time when we really get to really see what's going on. And what ends up happening, as I said before, is that your mind starts to get more choice, because you're not so caught up in the experience. You're watching everything. Now, in that state of observing and watching, what's happening is your mind, the busyness of your mind, your thoughts, and getting trapped and swept away by them, that settles down. Okay. Why does that settle down? Well, thoughts don't have to stop for this experience of settling. What ends up happening is you realize that your awareness doesn't get swept away by them. So if you, even right now, you can notice that you're observing as you're aware of yourself watching this video. So you're aware of being aware of the video, even though there's the content of what I'm saying and those thoughts related to the content also occurring. So the classic metaphor or simile is the sky. You become aware that the sky is always present, which is like awareness is always present, even though there could be clouds in the sky or birds flying by. Now, normally, your normal everyday mind gets kind of caught up in the experience of the clouds or the birds and forgets that you're watching, forgets the sky, that they're all occurring within the sky. It just gets swept up with the experience. Here, the sky is always present. Awareness is always present. And even now you can observe that everything that is occurring is not separate from your awareness. Just notice that, and notice how awareness doesn't treat anything differently. Awareness doesn't reject anything. In a sense, when we're talking about awareness, we're talking about the mind. The mind is not rejecting anything. Okay, rejecting is an activity that occurs within the mind, within awareness. Resistance is an activity that occurs, but awareness is always present in order for all of that to occur. And awareness itself is still. And in fact, the mind is actually still. And in order to experience that, we just allow ourselves to just be aware of awareness. Don't get involved so much. Now, that's a skill. That takes time, because it's like a reflex. We'll constantly get involved in thoughts, imagination, memory, sensations, emotions, all the time. And we'll talk more about why in the next stage. So basically, you can't change and transform your mind by talking to your mind and telling your mind to stop doing this or start doing that. That's just one aspect of experience trying to control itself, right? That's just conceptual mind just creating more thoughts to counteract other thoughts. What we need to do is just let go of the conceptual mind, let go of everything, let it occur the way it is, and see the spaciousness, the openness, which actually then turns into a deeper peace and contentment. Now, obviously, there is a method to this. There are stages of this, and this video is not the place to go into that. That's requires much more involvement and coaching, really. But simply put, everyone can observe that they are aware of what is occurring. And if you follow that, you naturally open up. So that's the undistracted practice of stage 3, practicing awareness. The other aspect of practicing awareness is awareness in everyday life. And remember we talked about these moments of spontaneous kind of awaking or awareness moments in stage 1. Well, you will find as you start practicing, you'll get more and more of those occurring in your day spontaneously, and you'll be more aware of them. Or you might be waiting, doing nothing, and where you normally might be bored or you get your phone out and start scrolling, you realize that, this is an opportunity for me to be aware, to open up. And for that minute or 2 or 5, while you're waiting for something at the traffic lights, in a queue, you have this moment, this amazing moments of open awareness. And this promotes deep transformation. Your day really changes. How, like I said before, you start responding rather than reacting. You're more accepting of what's occurring. Doesn't mean you don't take action, but your action is much more in tune with what's going on. So this is practicing awareness, which is really, in a sense, how your whole system starts to align. Your whole system starts to align to this open, aware state. Now, this really starts to increase in stage 4. And stage 4 is what I would call the emotional integration. And of course, we don't kind of stop stage 3 and go into stage 4. In a sense, each stage opens up like it's like an onion rings. One ring opens up, or a flower that one petal opens up to the next, to the next, to the next. Like Russian dolls, each doll opens up to another one inside. So as you get more skill with practicing awareness, what ends up happening is you also start to respond, like I said, differently rather than reacting. Now, reactions are very much often emotional, aren't they? There's irritation, anger, there's annoyance, they can be sadness, grief, guilt, jealousy, there can be anxiety, fear, stress, there can be joy, there can be care and love, concern. Now, a lot of these emotions are actually, in a sense, influenced by what's already kind of locked away within us. Okay, there's a few layers to this. So the first layer is I'll talk about, how our reactions when we're not so aware can be influenced by what's locked away within us, which I might call, Carl Jung, famous psychoanalyst who, really opened up the world of the collective unconscious and showed structures of the unconscious. Um, he talked about the structures of the unconscious, bit like this, the structures of our body. We all have, two arms and two legs mostly, but even though our body is different to everybody else's, we have different fingerprints, even though we all have 5 fingers. So he said also we have structures of the psyche. So there's archetypes, these are certain structures, and one important archetype would be the shadow. And the shadow part of our subconscious he talked about is these, what we've rejected, what we've repressed, what we don't like or don't want to show or reveal to others. Now, when we have a traumatic experience, or even if we, feel like we haven't been accepted and we felt embarrassed about some aspect, we can hide that even without realizing it. Our subconscious just does that to protect us from experience the discomfort. But particularly if there's some traumatic memory, it kind of gets quarantined, locked away, so that we can get on with life and we're not completely comatose or, frozen by that. Now, the idea is that over time, this can be, you know, released and resolved when we have the resilience and strength for that to occur. But I think for most people, as life goes on, we just accumulate more and more of, this kind of repressed, old, unresolved memories. Now, what then happens is, in the present, somebody can say something that connects with one of those buckets of repressed memory and that we don't accept and we don't like. And our reaction, not our response, our reaction can be spontaneous and really out of proportion with the situation that's actually occurring. Someone can say a small thing, we can just blow up. Now, this is kind of happens, and we feel out of control. And it's like, we commonly say pushing someone's buttons. This is a button that gets pushed, and the person, really reacts with that. And this is to do with what I would say is these unresolved emotional, circumstance or situations that have occurred in the past. Now, it can also occur in the present if our system feels threatened, or if we have this opportunity to gain something really pleasurable. So, and this relates to our, subconscious survival systems, the fight or flight system, which is about getting away from and destroying pain or getting away from it, and our reward system, which is about getting pleasure. And this is where cravings really come from. So we've got these survival mechanisms that can occur spontaneously, and they can also relate to, the past unresolved memories, because our subconscious can read a memory as almost happening now, and then it will react to this memory as if it's really, really happening, which is the extreme form of that would be PTSD, where, someone is, like post-traumatic stress disorder, someone is actually reliving an experience that was traumatic from the past, but they're remembering it and they're reacting to it as if it's happening now. But on a more minor scale, we can have these fight or flight reactions or these cravings for pleasure, which really are all about, protecting the me. to these memories or to the current situation when, we feel threatened or where there's something to gain. So, and now these experiences, like I'm saying, are subconsciously driven. The shadow material, the repressed emotional, unresolved emotions, and the survival mechanisms are all subconscious. And this is how it comes out of the blue, and our conscious mind feels out of control because it's suddenly happening without the conscious mind's choice. So often when we look at all of this, we see what I would call reactive cycles, patterns of behavior that spontaneously occur as reactions. Now, how does this come back to transformation? Well, I'll just add in before I say that addiction is one way that your subconscious tries to deal with this. It tries to get rid of the pain by getting you to take a substance or doing a behavior that's going to give you freedom from that pain and suffering or get you pleasure. That's one way to change this state of suffering, this reaction that's occurring, this emotional pain that's occurring, stress, anger, anxiety, irritation, annoyance, resistance. So basically, addiction comes in to try and help regulate that. But what I'm talking about in terms of these stages of transformation, when we get to this emotional integration phase, what's occurring there is as you do the open awareness practice, like I said, you're not so much caught up in the experience. You're actually you have this space where you're able to see what's happening, and you're not so caught in it. You're not spontaneously swept up and reacting. You're more able, there's more space to actually choose what the response might be. Now, the more that you experience this open, aware state, the more you experience this already okay stillness. And even if the reactive cycle does appear, you can see it as phenomena occurring, a bit like birds flying by or, stormy clouds going by, but you're not swept up by them because you are more identifying or experiencing the sky as well, which is always present and constant, or you're experiencing awareness, which is always present and conscious, that this reaction is occurring within. So the reaction doesn't become the whole world. And the other thing that's occurring as a result of your awareness practice is that you're not adding to the reaction. So the reaction might come up, you might feel this charge, but then you see it and you watch it without doing anything. Now, without seeing it, without the practice, what can end up happening is that you can add to it. You might get, defensive about it. You might get, you might just want to retreat and ignore it. You might want to blame the other person, and and that then causes more conflict, or you might feel guilty, or annoyed and fed up, or you might feel bored. And these are, further reactions upon reactions. So it's almost like a fire where you're throwing more logs on and it's getting bigger and bigger. And then it kind of gets more and more out of control. But if, on the other hand, when it first comes, this reaction first comes and you open up and see it, it doesn't have anywhere to go. You see it, you don't add to it, and, it will come and it will stay for a bit, then go. And after you observe that repeatedly, you notice that it comes and goes, comes and goes. And you also notice that your okayness is not dependent upon that situation being fixed, because you realize that you're actually already safe as awareness, as this deeper state of mind, this deeper state of being that's actually more still, more open, more content, more at peace. So, which is a much, much bigger, stable context for this kind of localized reaction to occur within. So you don't get swept away with it. Now, as you get practiced at this, over time, you see the reaction when it's in its infancy as just a very small charge. You can see it very quickly. And you get more and more practiced at not getting involved. You also have more information about what's important, because often these reactions are more about protecting the me, making the me get pleasure or avoid pain, and often at the expense of someone else. And so you then, and ordinarily will have conflict with others or competing with others. And that, in a sense, creates this separation from others, and you rather than this ability to see things from the other person's point of view and actually, in a sense, work together on the situation rather than competing and trying to, just get for yourself or get away from the pain yourself. So what ends up happening is you're not adding logs to the fire, you're catching it in its infancy and seeing it dies away quicker, doesn't stay as long, and you're more understanding the other person or the situation or your own, assumptions, motivations much more clearly. So what the upshot of all of this inner emotional transformation that's occurring is alignment. Your behavior and what's occurring within you is less subconsciously driven and more in alignment with this more expanded and open state that you have been practicing in terms of your awareness. So what I would say there is that, it's more about this transformation process and this letting go and seeing more of the truth, seeing more of what's occurring rather than trying to fix a situation and defend a situation. So this emotional integration and alignment just continues to occur. And bearing in mind you've got your undistracted practice going and you've got your a practice in everyday life happening, and it's all getting more and more refined, okay, as time goes on. So I think I've said a lot about that. I'm going to move on to stage 5. Now, stage 5 is more about where you're starting to, as a result of all of this, you're starting to, in a sense, redefine and understand on a deeper level what we really are. Now, I would call this more about embodiment and the state of being. So you start to see that instead of your mind and all the reactions kind of running your experience, running the show, you start to see that actually all these reactions are more like the servant, not the master. In a sense, the master is the nature of your mind, the nature of your being, which is already and always okay. And part of the reason why there's this sense of not okay and the need to defend and the need to have all these reactions and even all the the collections of unresolved trauma and memory, all of this is generally centered around this notion of me, and which we could call, the ego. But that's maybe a little bit just conceptual. So let's talk about it in terms of what that might be. What is the me? Well, it's a lot of the times we would identify that as my thoughts, my memories, my likes and dislikes, my body, my goals and desires, my strengths and weaknesses, whether I'm male or female, whichever culture and country I identify with. All of that is, if you look at all of that, they're all just pieces of information that we kind of assume make up this idea or this of me. When you talk about getting to know someone, it's getting to know all of this, isn't it? But all of that, if you look at it from the point of view of the practice, what you experience in the undistracted practice, all of that is phenomena that's occurring in the openness of awareness. Memory comes and goes. Thoughts come and go. Sometimes I'm taking action, which might demonstrate my strength, and sometimes I might be not acting. I might be just still. All of these, if my body changed, like let's say I had an accident and my arm got removed, or I cut my hair and looked different, I am not really, the me is not different. The sense of me is not different. So all of these things that are changeable don't really correspond to changing me when they change or when they're present or not present. All the characteristics, all the ways we define me, that is not fixed. And that's not present all the time, yet me, it seems to be always present. And the only other thing, which is not a thing, that's present all the time is awareness. So it's more accurate. You start to realize that it's more accurate to describe yourself as an, this open, aware state. And as I said, everything starts to align to that awareness. And that awareness is has an inherent stillness, an inherent peace, a deep okayness. And that can kind of, in a sense, spring forth as joy or and even gratitude and love. It's all part of that wellspring of this experience of the deep nature of what we are. And so defining ourselves as this kind of ego me, which is really quite a transient and shifting phenomena, you can see how it's really that we've really just created this conceptual me that we've kind of, we keep alive in our own mind. It's almost a kind of a fantasy that that we keep referring to. And that's convenient, for talking about me and you. And it's convenient and almost reinforced by our sensory experience, that we have this kind of point of orientating ourselves, or when we look around and we don't walk into walls and things because we can see the distance between, this center of sense experience and the wall. But that experience is, in a sense, something that we're constructing in the moment. And it doesn't take into account the fact that we're also perceiving, and aware of everything else that is present at the same time. That's not separate from awareness. So this convenient focal point, it's not the totality of what we are, because in open awareness there is no focal point. So we've got the relative experience and we've got the more open, non kind of bounded, it's the very open and free experience of what we are. And as we transform more and more, everything starts to get more aligned to this open and more inclusive experience of what we are. Now, at this point, this is where addiction you don't even need to be at stage 5 before addiction falls away. It usually falls away somewhere between stage 2 and stage 3 and stage 4, let's say. Let's have a look at that. It usually falls away, through the practice, but the practice doesn't even have to be super deep. It does need to be a sense of peace, a deeper state of being, because that becomes much more attractive to the subconscious than the reactive state, which is the reason why the subconscious is coming in and using the substances to regulate our state of being. If we have this ability and our to dip in and access a deeper, more content state of being, and it becomes more of our default, well, then addiction simply becomes obsolete. This is why with my clients, it just falls away. Addiction just falls away. So, one of the results of stage 5 there is this embodiment of this deeper state of being is you become more patient, you become more open, you're hanging on less, so you're more generous. You're not, you're not so fixated and on getting what you want all the time, because you are already satisfied just by being aware of what you are as this open, deep state of peace, and it's just things flow more easily. You're able to open up to the unknown more easily without fear. There's less fear, so you can easily take action. There's less procrastination. There's more creativity. So many things just are so much easier. And consequently, you, in a sense, this alignment that I'm talking about, this embodiment, is, in a sense, you're just freely flowing more as your natural state, your natural, unique kind of way of being is just free and uninhibited, more and more. So let's now move on to stage 6, which is what I would call, it's really not the end. Stage 6 isn't the end. Obviously each of these stages has a lot more, detail within them. And stage 6 is really, in a sense, just kind of looking into the horizon, in a sense. It's where all of what we've been talking about just becomes more and more subtle awareness and more an increasing freedom. Now, it's not really, like a final stage where you suddenly have fixed your mind. It's more about continuing to transcend the limitations of the unawareness of the mind, unawareness of what we are, so it's a continual revealing of more and more subtlety. And this does, there's many traditions where, it does go into the deeper energies of the body, the deeper experiences of how our body and mind interconnect. which is a much vaster subject. But that's really, not so possible until we, have some more stability where the emotional integration has occurred more, and there's less turmoil that we're creating with our reactive cycles, where there is this more constant kind of level of peace, and on the basis of that we can experience more refined and subtle experiences of the phenomena of what we are, and consequently how everything relates, other people, all the physical phenomena, and in a sense an experience of interconnectedness of everything. So one thing I should say about this stage of more subtle awareness and the increasing freedom is that there's a freedom of not needing everything to be perfect. Because and it's more about experiencing that there was really never anything wrong. It was just we had such a limited experience, and we're then fighting and reacting against what was occurring. The idea of perfect, something better, is in a sense something that a state that we're imagining that's not present, isn't it? We're saying, oh, this is not good enough. It's because we're imagining something else that's not occurring that is better. So we're then comparing what's present with this future imaginary state. Now, the problem there is not that we're aware of a future possibility. The problem is that we're expecting that future to be now. We're expecting that imaginary state to exist now, and then we're getting in a sense, dissatisfied and feeling a lack in the present because of the imaginary state. Now, what we really need to be doing is seeing the truth of what's occurring, which is that what is happening, and there's this imaginary phenomena that we're contemplating that could be happening, possibly. But you've got to see it as imaginary, not as, not expecting it to be occurring now. Seeing it as imagination, seeing it as something that the phenomena of imagination, seeing it for what it is, you see. So in doing that, we're not expecting everything to conform, to this conceptual framework that we've got. So we don't get into conflict with that. So in a sense, even though things are imperfect, that's not wrong. It's just the way they are. And we're also, as we become more aware and subtly aware, like I said before, we really experience the truth that we are not completely defined by or identified with our emotions, with our thoughts, with our identity as me. We see all of that as changing phenomena, that's in the moment, coming and going, that's actually not independently existing, because it's all interconnected with everything, including interconnected with our own perception, our own consciousness of that. So our experience of what we are becomes more and more open to the point of being, in a sense, not separate from anything that we're aware of, which then gets to the point of being nowhere or empty, but not empty in the sense of nothing, because it's aware, self-aware. That changes everything. So yet we're nowhere, but yet we're present. And we don't need anything because we're content already. We're already okay. And it's this deepening experience of this that really allows us to not be constantly trying to grab onto the phenomena that's occurring and trying to keep it and hold it and fix it and, or reject it. All of that activity is just let go. And the beauty of and the mystery of the unknown and the magic and the beauty of what's occurring is just part of our experience. And of course, at this, subtle level, what we're really dealing with in terms of addiction is not really outer substance addictions or gross behavioral addictions. It's really more the addiction of the mind to thinking, the mind to identifying with itself as in separate me. I mean, that is the root addiction, I think. The root ignorance, I suppose, that you could call it, where we find that occurring all the time, that we're constantly making me the center of the world when actually there is no center there. So continually, realizing this more and more continually, I suppose. So, so ultimately, that we can realize that we were never really trapped. It's just that we were not aware of the truth of what of more of the totality or more of what was occurring, including within ourselves, that we were constantly trying to fix things when we didn't really even need to. So transformation, mind transformation, is this, in a sense, an inside-out solution to addiction. And it becomes a permanent solution because the more awareness you have, the more subtly you are constantly experiencing this deeper state, the less you need to be trying to change it because it's already okay, and you experiencing that more and more constantly. And it's so much more satisfying. So the subconscious just doesn't need the addiction. So if you've resonated with this, what I've said, don't stop here. Really don't just stop with the conceptual understanding. Don't just flick to the next video and go, oh yeah, that was interesting, and then do nothing about it. Because the transformation doesn't occur just because you have a conceptual moment. The transformation is a deeply embodied whole being transformation, opening up, that becomes more and more stable and more open and more permanent. And this is really opening to what we really deeply desire, isn't it? Deep peace and contentment. If you really look at whatever the root of what we're doing, the root of why we're doing anything, it's for this deep peace and contentment. And it needs to be an embodied practice. We've got to, nothing will change. It'll just keep on going on and on all these reactive cycles, if our mind is continually, getting swept along with a small subset of information. Needs to open up. And that's when the change occurs. And that opening requires practice and engagement continually on a daily basis. So, if you'd like to experience this more firsthand, if you'd like to engage in more of how to walk this path, there's a few things you could do. You can go to the website, which is truequit.com. It's in the description. You can explore there. There's a masterclass you can have a look at, particularly if you have addiction. And you could join the awareness community. It's very minimal cost. We could actually get involved in the Addiction to Freedom program, where you step through, step by step by step, guided by me personally, to walk this path and at least up to the point where your addiction ends. But you can also continue with the Emotional Freedom course or Living with Awareness. So there's a lot of possibilities there. And if that's not where you're at, I hope you've really got something out of this. I hope this has contributed to your path. Other than that, maybe see you in the next video or see you in the community. Okay, bye for now.